Long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Trey Orndorff, a political scientist at Oklahoma Christian University, and I'm joined by the professor of law at Chase Law School, Ken Katkin. Ken, welcome to our midweek supporters exclusive show.
It is great to be back.
Well, it is great. I mean, this is my favorite new show right now, which is Trey and Ken go through the Constitution, which was recommended by supporters. So if you're listening in for the first time, keep in mind, we have been doing this for the entirety of this year. And, if my calculations are correct, and they're rarely wrong, we're not going to be getting done with this this year because, we got a lot of amendments to get to, too. So what that means is we've been going through the Constitution, one article, one section at a time, and just understanding and chatting about it. And that's always a lot of fun. And so what we've gotten to at this point is, we've covered the overview of the Constitution. We've covered Articles 1, 2, 3. And as of today, we are now halfway through Article 4. We just finished last week Sections 1 and 2. And what we're going to be taking up this week is Sections 3 and 4. And then depending on time, we might even get into Article 5 of the Constitution. And so I thought, just like we always do, what we do is we read a section and then we kind of analyze and talk about those sections. And so that's what we're going to be doing right here. So let's start here with, this is Article 4, Section 3. So if you're opening your hymnals, your constitutions, again, it's Article 4, Section 3. There's going to be 25% of people who get that joke, Ken, and then other people are going to be like, what is he talking about, right? We're going to know. That and hold it in readiness. If you know those two phrases, sir, we have similar backgrounds. Anyway, my inside Christianity baseball aside, here we go. Article 4, Section 3. New states may be admitted by the Congress into this union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the junction of two or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned, as well as of the Congress. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules, regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States, and nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States or of any particular state. Now, this is oftentimes called the admissions clause. And it doesn't, we had talked beforehand in the show, this hasn't come up a lot, but it has come up frequently, right? So, for example, Massachusetts, the legislature ends up consenting to the formation of Maine. Maybe one of the more controversial or interesting portions of the use of Article 4, Section 3 comes up during the Civil War, right? Because Virginia, it doesn't end up consenting to the formation of West Virginia, right? West Virginia ends up at the outset of the breakaway because it is the pro-union portion of that state. And as a result, you get Virginia and West Virginia. It doesn't happen often, but those are the two that I know the most familiar with. But even in the main show, this deals with things that we are still dealing with it in some ways, Ken, right? So, for example, how are we going to deal with territories? And we had talked in terms of Israel, and you had brought into the conversation Puerto Rico, right? We still have territories in the United States. And in the case of Puerto Rico, they want to become a state, but that hasn't necessarily yet happened. So what are some other items that we should know about the admissions clause?
Yeah, actually, you already raised the two episodes I was going to talk about the most, which were Maine and West Virginia.
Well, see, then I'm right.
The West Virginia
hit yours exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me say a little more about both. But Maine, you basically said all that needs to be said. That in Maine, because of the Compromise of 1820, and the Missouri wanted to be admitted as a state, and had been a territory, and it was going to come in as a slave state, and there was basically uniform opposition in the free states to admitting another slave state, because that could it would change the balance of how many, the ratio of free states to slave states. And so Henry Clay of Kentucky negotiated a compromise of 1820 where he sort of pitched the idea, well, how about if we admit Missouri as a slave state, but we also admit one more free state at the same time, so that it won't change the ratio. And people are like, well, where are you going to find another place to admit that's a free state? We don't have enough people in any of the free territories. And the idea was floated, well, why not just carve Maine out of Massachusetts? And that was actually controversial in both Maine and Massachusetts.
Yeah.
All of that was Massachusetts then, but people who lived both in the part that was going to remain Massachusetts and people who lived in the part that was going to become Maine, there was opposition, both because it would shrink the size of Massachusetts, but even more so because a lot of abolitionists thought at the time didn't actually like the compromise. And a lot of abolitionists thought, well, it's better to just never admit any more slave states. That's the most important thing. So, the idea we could admit one free state and one slave state, maybe that's the lesser evil, but it's still an evil because we're still admitting another slave state. And so it was actually hard to get it through. It was a real nail biter. I think if I remember this correctly, the Maine politician who was the chief proponent of it in Maine and who kind of, garnered up all the support within Maine for breaking Maine out of Massachusetts and in order to advance the Compromise of 1820. I believe that his name was King, and I believe his brother was a U.S. senator from New York who was an abolitionist and who opposed it on abolitionist grounds. So you had this family drama there. But in the end, the votes came in, and so the people of Massachusetts voted to allow Maine to split off, and the Congress voted the Compromise of 1820. So they did admit both Massachusetts and Maine. And that was an example of the language you just read, where a state was in fact formed out of the jurisdiction of another state. Maine was formed out of the jurisdiction of Massachusetts, but that is allowed if you have the consent of both the state and the Congress, and that's what happened here. Now, the situation with West Virginia was more complicated, and I think you noted the conventional version of that history.
Yeah.
But yet the version that you noted, which is the conventional version, would have to lead you to the conclusion that West Virginia is unconstitutional, right? Because I think you said Virginia never consented to it, right?
Yeah, of course, the possibility the argument there, of course, is by seceding. Therefore they can't consent because they're not part of that. But of course, the counter to that, of course, was Lincoln's argument, which was, well, you couldn't ever really succeed. You were just in rebellion, in which case then it probably is unconstitutional. I'm curious what you have to say about that, actually.
Yeah. Well, the founding fathers of West Virginia papered over that problem. So there is a formal response to the history that you gave, and this has been accepted, even though I think everybody sees it as a fig leaf. But there were people from Wheeling. So in Wheeling, they were forming like the new West Virginia government, and people from Wheeling knew that our Article 4, Section 3, Clause 1 would not allow West Virginia to be recognized as a state unless Virginia consented to it. So the way they actually decided to deal with that was they sent a delegation over to Richmond. Now, this was during the period of time when the Confederates were still in full secession. This was 1863, so the war hadn't been won yet, and so the government that considered itself the government of Virginia, meeting in Richmond, considered themselves to be a state of the Confederate States of America. They didn't consider themselves still to be part of the United States of America. So people from Wheeling snuck into Richmond, and they set up a what they called the official Virginia legislature, and they convened it. And they said, well, we're actually the legislature of the state of Virginia, which is still part of the Union. Let's take a vote on whether us, the legislature of the state of Virginia, will authorize a new state of West Virginia to be carved out of the territory of Virginia. And they did that in Richmond. They didn't do that in Wheeling. And then they called themselves the legitimate legislature of Virginia. They voted to recognize the secession of West Virginia, and then they went back to Wheeling and they voted to adopt that, and then the Congress voted to recognize all that. So there was actually a vote in Richmond as well as in Wheeling, but it was really by just a self-proclaimed state legislature of the state of Virginia at the time.
I did not know about it. I love that covering. I didn't know about that fig leaf. That's a good way to call that. That's no. Now here's another territorial one that's interesting in terms of that. Do you know why Oklahoma has a panhandle?
It must have something to do with its history as Indian territory, I suppose.
Weirdly, no. So,
okay, well, you got to enlighten me then.
Yeah, so Indian Territory actually would have made Oklahoma a square, something much more similar to what you see in Nebraska or Colorado. Well, that's it for this preview. I'm sorry to stop us there. So if you want to hear the rest of what I and Ken are talking about when it comes to Article 4 of the Constitution, you're going to need to become a supporter of the Politics Guys. And I'm sure that you're interested in, well, where does that panhandle come from? And what else has to do? There's actually a power of Congress located there in Article 4 that we're going to be talking about in a minute as well. And we'd love to have you join us not only in today's supporter exclusive show, but you can go back. You can actually follow Ken and myself along. We started with Article 1 all the way back. You can go back. You'll get access to all of that when you become a supporter of the Politics Guys. So you want to unlock all of that? Well, let me tell you how you do it. You're going to head to patreon.com/politicsguys. And there you're going to see all different kinds of levels of support. We have tons of offerings. One of them includes, well, this show. So go ahead, make yourself at least a $5 member supporter of the show. You'll get access to all of our midweek shows. Here's the other really cool thing. Absolutely no ads. That's right. You don't get any ads with those. So if you head to patreon.com/politicsguys, you're going to be able to get this show and all of our other shows ad-free, plus these midweek supporter-exclusive shows. Now, there's other things you can take advantage of as becoming a member as well. So, for example, we've got our Discord group, always on there, always having wonderful conversations. We've got all kinds of cool things. But to understand it and to get it, just head to patreon.com/politicsguys. Now, there's other ways to support the show as well. You can support us via Venmo, where we're at Politics Guys. You can also support the show through PayPal. To find all of that, you can see the support links in the show notes. Just go ahead and click on read more and you'll see them all right there. Or if you like to pop that into a web browser, just go ahead and pop up Safari on your iPhone and head to politicsguys.com/support and you can see all the different ways of supporting the show. And again, the most immediate thing you're going to get access to is the exclusive midweek supporter show. You're going to have to finish the show with myself and Ken, and I really hope that you do. If you've got any other kind of question or comment, you can always reach us at mail@politicsguys.com. You can also reach out to us on Facebook and Twitter. You're going to see all of those links in the show notes. As always, we want a big shout out of support to the executive producers of the Politics Guys. And they are Bruce Johnson, Wilma Marino, Andra Masker, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, Don Oglesby, and Ivan English. We have a full episode here this weekend, or don't forget, head to politicsguys.com and /support and become a member and finish this show right now. I hope you will.